Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tea and Talk with Tammy. Um, so tonight's a little different. First of all, I don't have a tea message because they're out of that tea in the store right now. But I am drinking tea, iced tea though. And I'm going to read something else that's a little message that I'm going to share that has to do with what we're doing tonight. And just going to introduce my cousin real quick. This is my cousin Eyvon.
Hello.
She's agreed to help me with what we're doing tonight. Um, so Yvonne and I are going to kind of switch roles. She's going to interview me tonight. And so I'm going to read my message and then we're going to start with that. So my message that I'm sharing tonight is, you can accept or reject the way you are treated by other people, but until you heal the wounds of your past, you will continue to bleed. You can bandage the bleeding with food, with alcohol, with drugs, with work, with cigarettes, with sex, but eventually it will all ooze through and stain your life. You must find the strength to open the wounds, stick your hand inside, and pull out the core of the pain that is holding you in your past, the memories, and make peace with them. This is by Iyanla Vanzant, and it's from her book called Yesterday I Cried. And that quote, so I have this little book that I keep quotes in, and I started doing that about 10 years ago. And that quote I have taped in the very part of my book where you open it, because when I read that, it was about 10 years ago when I read this quote, and it really made me stop and think about all the relationships. At that time, I was separated from my husband, and that quote made me stop and think about all my relationships in my life and how the things I hadn't healed from my childhood had, exactly what she said, had bled over into all of my relationships. And so tonight we're going to talk about that. And that's why I wanted to read that quote. So Yvonne.
Okay. So here's Tammy's bio. Tammy says, God has blessed my life with many titles. I have had the honor of experiencing being a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a granddaughter, a niece, a cousin, and a friend. My relationship with God has become the center of my life. My greatest joy in life has been raising my 3 boys and watching them grow and transition into adulthood. I am grateful every day for the gift of motherhood. My favorite things to do are writing, reading, being outdoors, traveling, listening, learning, and teaching others. I wake up curious each day to discover what God is bringing into my life. One of the greatest things God has given me is the gift of forgiveness, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Okay. So, how would you define forgiveness?
So forgiveness to me is, so I was raised as a Mormon, most people know, and they teach you in religion that you need to forgive and forget. That has never worked for me. Never worked for me. When I was getting ready to move here from California, my husband and I had decided we were going to divorce and I was going to move back here. I was watching a show by Oprah and I heard her give a definition of forgiveness, and it made complete sense to me. And her definition was, if you give up the idea, forgiveness is giving up the idea that the past could have ever been any different. Because I think when we're raised in, like I was, in an abusive home, you sit there and you say, well, what if I had done this, if I had done that, then that wouldn't have happened, and we say a lot of what ifs, or could have, should have, would have, all that stuff.
Right.
And when you stop doing that and you just realize it is what it is, it happened, you can't change it, all you can do now is accept it. And part of accepting it is allowing others to accept their responsibility and not carry it with you, which is what I did. I carried a lot of what my parents should have owned. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame around that when that wasn't really my place to carry that. And so I feel like forgiveness is just giving up the idea that anything could have been different, because it couldn't. It's sifting and sorting about what's for you to carry and what's for you to let other people carry. And that's how I have learned forgiveness for myself. And it's worked for me. Worked for me in letting things go and just realizing that some things are just not my responsibility. And
Right.
it makes it easier. So that's my definition of forgiveness.
Well, good. I think that when we're growing up, or you're in a situation like that, it's hard to realize, especially when you're young,
Mm-hmm.
this is their issue,
Right.
you know, and this isn't something for me to hold on to. It's something they need to work through. That's really hard in the moment
Right.
to realize.
And I didn't even get that until I was in my 40s. So I carried
Same here.
I carried a lot of guilt and shame and disappointment, sadness, anger. Carried a lot of stuff with me over the years. And I just had to let that stuff go, but it wasn't easy. And I didn't start doing it until I moved back here to Colorado, and I was 42 then, you know, so
Right.
it was a long time of carrying that stuff. But,
Yeah. So what is the most valuable lesson you think you've learned through forgiveness, and why?
I think the most valuable part of forgiveness for me and the lesson that I've learned is how to forgive, how to understand where I came from, and how it has shaped me, how it has the way I think, the way I act, the way I react to things is all based on that. And I understand myself more now than I ever have. And I know when my triggers are coming, and I know when to stop and to understand them. But I think the greatest part of that was learning to forgive myself, not even others, but myself. I had to do a lot of that, because when you start looking at those things and you start saying, why did I do this? Why did I do that? Why did I do this? You know, and part of moving past the past is also forgiving yourself. And sometimes it's harder to do that than it is to forgive others.
Yeah.
So I would say forgiving myself is my greatest lesson.
What did you have to do? What was the hardest thing when you're trying to forgive yourself? I mean, what did you have to do in order to get to that point where you feel like, okay, I forgive myself for this, or I'm still not ready to forgive for that? Because, you know, for me at least, things always, I think I've forgiven and I think I've moved on, but then it creeps up a little bit and it's like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't fully forgive myself for that. So why am I still holding on to that?
Exactly, that's what it is. And it's still a piece of it that you're holding on to, and it doesn't show up. You think it's gone, but then it just shows up in a different form. It's
Right.
the same thing. It's the same lesson that you're being taught.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to have a conversation with God, and I had to say, you know what, I'm ready for this to be gone. I need you to remove anything that is not of you. And God is love, right? So anything that's not of love, I need it to be removed. I need it to be removed from my heart and from my mind. But here's the thing, once you do that, you're opening this wide door. Like the quote I just read, you know, said you have to put your hand in and pull that pain out. That is exactly what's going to happen. And healing is a very painful process,
Right.
because you're looking at the dark side of you, and all that stuff is being pulled out up to the surface, and it's being pulled there for you to look at it, to understand it, and to let it go. But sometimes the experiences that come in our life to draw that stuff out is what's painful.
Right.
And it can be a painful experience. But once, I'm just telling everybody, once you tell God, I need all this removed, and he starts working, sometimes it's a painful process. But it is very much worth it, because I've gotten to a point where I understand myself better, and I know how I think and how I operate. And I can see myself doing things, and I understand why I'm doing them, and I can stop myself from doing them now, whereas before
Right.
I would just jump in and do whatever, and and now it's a different process for me. But for me, getting rid of that stuff was just having a conversation with God and saying, I'm done with this. I want it gone. And he started working on me about 8 years ago. And that was my conversation with him when I moved here from California. I was like, I want a new experience, and I want something new in my life, and I'm tired of all of this.
Yeah.
It has been an 8-year process for me, and I'm not even kidding. And it's been a roller coaster ride, and things have been, well, most of it.
Yeah.
It's been hard, but it's all had a purpose. And when I look at it now, the whole last decade was a roller coaster ride for me on a lot of different levels. But it was all healing. It was all healing process when I look at it now. So I'm very grateful for it, but it was very painful. And sometimes I think pain sometimes comes before peace comes. And because it's like that quote said, you're ripping out that pain. And
Right.
it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not painless.
Right. Well, then it would be easy,
Right.
right? If it was painless, and then maybe you're not going to learn the lesson that you're supposed to.
Right. And that's why
Going through it.
and that's why it shows up again. And that happens a lot. We have cycles, that repeat. And when those cycles are repeating, and most of the time those are the way we react to something. And if you notice that your cycle is repeating itself, I'm reacting to the same thing just in a different form,
Right.
then you start to say, okay, what's going on? How can I stop this from repeating in my life? Because that happens a lot over the last 10 years for me. It just happened a lot. And that's another thing what that quote is about, is if you don't heal the things from your past, they just end up bleeding into every relationship that you have. It just shows up in a different form. And it just keeps coming up until you heal it. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of being able to recognize when something is repeating, and really looking at it and analyzing it and saying, okay, what is this connected to? How can I heal whatever it's connected to? And that's a whole other process in itself.
The healing process is different, you say?
Understanding why things are repeating. So
Mm-hmm.
when cycles start repeating and you start noticing that it's repeating and it's showing up, but it's just in a different form, then being able to notice that and to question it and to analyze it and say, why is this repeating? Why is this repeating in my life? Like, some people attract the same kind of people in their life over and over and over. And that's a cycle. That's something that's not healed. And anything that repeats is something that's not healed. And it's usually related to something from the past. It just shows up in a different form. That's all.
So what tools do you use for going through this process? I know we've talked about journaling. What else do you do?
I do journaling. I've slowed down a little bit on my journaling, but over the years I've done a lot of journaling just because journaling really helps you see a different perspective. And sometimes you don't even realize you're seeing it until you're just writing about it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could see that. You know? So I think journaling is important for people. But one of the things, when I first came back here, I met a lady that was my spiritual life coach, and you know her.
Yeah.
Her name is Randy. Hi, Randy.
Hi, Randy.
But she was my spiritual life coach for 2 years. And one of the first things she had me do was read the book Radical Forgiveness. And a lot of times when I'm forgiving myself or other people, I will use the Radical Forgiveness worksheets. And so I have the book right here. And this other one is Radical Self-Forgiveness. But so in this book, and it's by Colin Tipping, and this book changed my life because it made me see people differently, first of all, in my life. And it taught me a different way of forgiving. And so I use a lot of his worksheets. His worksheets are free downloads on his website. And I haven't used them lately, but I have used them a lot in the past. And when I was coaching, I gave them to my coaching clients as well, because what he talks about in here is very powerful, and it really shifts the perspective on how you see people in your life. And it makes the forgiveness part much, much easier, or it did for me anyway. So, but that's one thing that I do. And the other thing is I pray, and I ask God to give me the strength and the courage to forgive myself and to forgive others. And that doesn't always just happen right away. Sometimes it just happens out of the blue, and I'm like, oh. Like I'll be having a conversation with somebody on the phone that I needed to forgive, and I'll just notice in that phone conversation that I don't feel that anger anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because you know when you're speaking to someone that you need to forgive for whatever situation, you can feel it in your body. You know, you tense up, you can definitely feel it. And so, yeah, like you say, then you just realize, hey, I don't feel that way anymore with this person.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's a perfect way of realizing that you've been able to forgive. So that's good.
I'll use my dad as an example. So like now, my dad, when he calls, I used to feel really intimidated by him and would just kind of hurry up and get off the phone kind of thing. But now it's different. I want different things for my dad now. Before it was about forgiving him and forgiving myself and forgiving my mom, but it's different with my dad now. I know I've forgiven my dad now because I want different things for him. And that is, I would love for him to be at peace before he leaves this earth.
Yeah.
And so that's a different prayer for me now. And that's huge for me. Very huge for me. I didn't realize that until, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, that I wanted different things for him. I want different things for my mom too. But when you start to, you've forgiven that person when you are wishing the best for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's my biggest, I guess, experience with forgiveness is being able to forgive my dad and my mom. So,
yeah. I don't know if this is more of a process of grief or anything like that, but after my parents passed, that's probably the one time I journaled the most. And it was me writing to them.
nice.
And it just got to the point where I would, I had to do it multiple times during the day or at night or whenever I was doing. And then it slowly sort of decreased where I didn't feel so strongly that I had to do that. I don't know if this definitely makes sense or not, but I felt at peace
Mhm.
So then it was like, okay, I don't need to continue to do this. I mean, like you say, I pray and I talk to them, you know, but I don't, um, I didn't feel that I needed to continue that process on. So I think for me, it got to a point where I was resolved, you know,
You had said
I had
everything
like,
that you wanted to say, that you
yeah,
felt.
I had said everything I needed to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was part of your healing process. I
Yeah.
think everybody's process is different, and that was part of your healing process. And because your parents, they passed away pretty close together. I mean, and to have to deal with that, and Aunt Janice dying a week before your dad,
Yeah.
and dad
Yeah.
dying, and that was a lot to have to process.
It was a lot. But I feel like for me, because I felt like there was things I should have done differently, or, you know, before their passing or after their passing or any of that stuff, for me, I needed to, what I'm saying is that I felt like by me writing through that and working through that, I was able to release that. And in doing so, I forgave myself.
Right.
For,
And then it was just after you journaled that and you said what
yeah.
you felt like you needed to say, that was a healing process for you. And then one day you just realized you didn't need that anymore because that's
Yeah.
how you healed.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's wonderful. So, anything else?
Well, I don't have any
I
questions.
do have, I do have something else I can read.
Yeah, I thought you wanted to. Okay.
It's also by Iyanla Vanzant. I have a hard time saying her first name. Iyanla Vanzant.
Okay.
Okay, so when you need to be loved, you take love wherever you can find it. When you are desperate to be loved, feel love, know love, you seek out what you think love should look like. When you find love, or what you think is love, you will lie, kill, and steal to keep it. But learning about real love comes from within. It cannot be given, cannot be taken away. It grows from your ability to recreate within yourself the essence of loving experiences you have had in your life. And so this quote for me is about learning to love yourself. And when we're searching outside of ourselves for love, it's it's like she said, it's you're looking for something how you think love is, but the truth is it's not, it's not how it is, because if you don't know how to love yourself, you cannot fully love another person,
Yeah.
because you cannot give something that you cannot get something that you cannot give.
Right.
And that was something that I discovered in my marriage. um, it was hard to, because so when you're when you're raised in an abusive home, you're not taught what love is, and you're certainly not taught to love yourself because
Right.
you're too busy trying to please everyone else so that you don't get your ass beat. Sorry, but that's true.
Well, you're trying to protect yourself, right? So you're always in protect mode.
There's
Yeah.
a defense mechanism that goes on, and it's not, you definitely do not learn how to love yourself. And I did not learn that until last year. So, I'm just saying. And I know for sure, I've heard that quote before, that you cannot fully love somebody else until you love yourself. And I never really understood that, but until last year. And then when I started looking at my marriage and how things transpired there, it was because I did not love myself. I used to blame a lot of things on him, and a lot of it was me. A lot of it was me, because I carried into that relationship, I carried a lot of anger, and really, really deep anger that came out. It really showed its ugly face in that marriage. And sadness and guilt and shame And all of those things come when you're not loving yourself. And because if you love yourself, then you know that first of all, you start to see you have to let people own their own stuff. And for me, that was letting my dad, my parents own their own stuff. And then looking at me and saying, okay, what do I need to let go of now? And a lot of that
Right.
was anger. I had anger for a very long time in my life. And I thought that I had let that go until last year when I had that incident. And I became very angry after that because, I just started questioning, why would that happen to me, and God healed that anger. But I think it's healed on some level, but I had an experience in the grocery store that it came.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily because of that.
Oh my goodness. So this man, I had my basket kind of off to the side of me, and I was turned my back to it, and I was getting these avocados. And when I turned around to put them in the basket, he like picked up my basket and shoved it in front of me. And I was like, and this man was like really short, and he was elderly. And I was like, he is angry. That man is angry. And it didn't really bother me at first, but as I was going through the store and I was getting the more I thought about it, I was getting mad. I was like, how dare he just it into me, And I started feeling anger. And as I checked out, the girl that was putting the groceries in the bag, she was irritating me the way she was putting the groceries in the bag. And I was like, okay, I have to get out of this store because this is like stewing in me, right?
Yes,
And,
yes.
And before I came in the store, there were Girl Scouts out there selling cookies.
And you didn't get any cookies, did you?
I knew when I was going to come out, I was going to buy cookies, okay? But by this time, I'm like irritated. And so I put my money out before I get out the door because I'm just going to buy one box. And I go over to the table and I keep hearing this say thank you. Because usually in the past, when I would get angry, and I'm talking about in my marriage, when I would get angry, I would take it out on him. And I felt myself, that little helpless little Girl Scout.
This little Girl Scout.
She's like, why do you want cookies? I'm like, yes, I want that box right there. And I keep having this like overwhelming feeling. You say thank you, And so when she handed me the cookies, I was like, thank you, have a nice day. And I went to the car. And when I got in the car, I was like, okay, God, I don't know where this is coming from. Because at first it didn't bother me. But then as I went on and I started thinking about what had happened, I was just like, I'm like, okay, where is this coming from? And what do I have to do to get rid of it? And a few days later, I was shown in a dream my answer. And I still had some hurt and some anger over what my ex-husband, the reason why we had split up, what he had done, and I needed to let that go. And so the purpose of me telling this story is that when something comes up for you, you can ask God to show you what is this and where is it coming from and how can I heal it and let it go. And so that morning when I woke up after I had the dream, and I was like, okay, I know what I have now. And so I asked God, what do you want me to do? How do I heal this? Because we're so used to doing things on our own, or I am, because so much of my childhood was out of my control. So as an adult, I love to control everything because it feels safe. Right. One of the things that God is teaching me is that He's in control. I'm not in control. He has me surrender a lot. And one of the things that he put on my heart that day to do was to write a letter that, just like you did in the journaling, that I needed to write a letter of what it was making me feel and why, and how could I forgive him and how could I forgive myself. Because I think both things need to be done when you're doing forgiveness. It's forgiving yourself and the other person.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I just felt a relief. And I don't know, sometimes I just think that when I'm asking God for healing, sometimes it could be something as simple as that. But then there have been times where he has guided me to a therapist. He has guided me to a church. He's guided me to the right people to help me with things. And so it's not always simple little things like that, but sometimes it's been other things and other ways. And you just have to listen for guidance and do what you're being asked to do to heal it. So. That's all I got. What you got?
So eating a box of cookies is not the answer?
I wish it was.
I've been doing this wrong the whole time.
And they only show up a couple times a year, so.
Well, you got to stock up. They freeze well. Right. If they make it to the freezer.
God bless the Girl Scouts, right?
Right. No kidding. No kidding. So after going through all of this, if you could go back and talk to your younger self when you were in that, you know where this is going, in the abusive house, what would you say to her? Get out now. No, I'm just kidding.
Run.
Get away. Run. I'm totally kidding.
I know. I would tell her that, first of all, try not to take things personal and to realize that it's not your fault and that you are loved and you are lovable and you are loved, and that to love yourself. You know, don't let all that stuff weigh you down, because it did. And put God first. I've told this story before about when I was 15, and that was my first experience with the Holy Spirit. And I wish then, because I knew what had happened and what I experienced, and I wish then that I had started a relationship with God and carried that forward instead of the crap that I carried forward. But it didn't happen that way. And it's okay, because I feel like I'm in a place now where I understand all of that. And I've always known in the back of my mind that I was going to use those experiences to teach others and to help others. And I was doing that for a while, but I think, God had a different plan, and he needed more to be healed before I could do more. And sometimes teaching by experience is the best way to teach. And I needed to go through certain experiences in order to spiritually grow, emotionally grow, and mentally grow. All of those things, because if we're not learning things and we're not growing, then what are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing? What's the point?
Right.
And ever since that experience that I had last year, and I know there's only like a handful of people in my life who know what happened. And someday I'll be on here telling that story. I'm just not ready yet and haven't really been guided to tell it, but I'm going to tell it. I don't know if it's going to be on here or in a book, but I feel like it needs to be told, because God uses people and their experiences to be the example and to show others how he works in their life. And if you're not sharing those experiences, then you're not sharing his glory, and you're not showing how he does things here for people. And so that story is going to have to be told. I just don't know when yet.
It seems to be coming up more often,
Yes.
you know. So maybe you're working up the courage to put that story out there.
Yes,
you know?
because I want it to be told in a way that is, first of all, everyone who needs to hear it can hear it and understand it.
Yeah.
Because I know that there are always people who don't understand things, and so they react in a way that I don't like. I don't necessarily like how they react, right?
Right. Right.
And I think a part of what God is preparing me for right now, and even in just doing this tea and talk, is building up confidence and other areas that I needed to have built up before I tell that story.
Yeah.
Because it is a very powerful story, and it changed my life. I know that. It changed the way that my relationship with God. And through that experience, I learned to put him first. And so back to your question with the little girl, I would tell her to put God first because it would save her a lot of pain.
But you've talked in the past about how when you were growing up, you were in the Mormon church and all of that stuff. So I'm not discounting you, but I'm just saying, if someone's in that same situation where they're going to church and they're doing all that stuff, and you say, let's put God first, it's still hard in that situation if you can't follow what they're saying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you don't believe, you're like, well, you're a kid. So you're
Right.
like, yes, I believe in this and I'm going to be totally faithful. But there's going to be times in your life where I think people are going to probably falter a little bit from that.
Yes, and I did that for 30 years. I turned 18 and my parents said I didn't have to go back to church. I was like, woohoo!
I'm out of here.
Because I didn't like the Mormon church. I didn't fit in there, for one thing. And to me, they were teaching us as little girls to be nothing but homemakers.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. I just couldn't sit with that. But that was the only religion I knew as a child.
Right.
But it did teach me about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And when I had that experience when I was 15, when the Holy Spirit came to me and spoke to me, and when I say it spoke to me, it wasn't like a voice that said, hey, how's it going?
So let's sit and have some tea.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, it was like, and what was really neat is that my best friend at the time was with me when this happened, and she felt it too. So I got a witness.
Woo-hoo! Give me a witness.
She was raised in the Mormon church. And so the day that this happened to us, we were sitting on a hill out in front of our high school, and we were eating lunch, and there was something going on in our life, and I'm not going to go into that right now.
You don't need to.
Major stuff. But it was something that was going on in our life. And so they teach you to fast and pray when you want answers to things. And so that's what we did. We were fasting and praying. And on that morning, we were sitting out on that hill, and the Holy Spirit came, and it just completely surrounded me. It was this warm energy that felt completely loving. And that energy just said, it's going to be okay. And it was the feeling that said that. It wasn't a voice that said it. But so I knew in that moment that I believed in the one thing I learned in that church was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And through that experience, I carried that with me, but I had no desire to go to church after I turned 18. And so I went for 30 plus years not going to church. I did try to go back to the Mormon church when I was probably in my 30s. And I had the missionaries come to my house, and we met in a park because Jeff was anti-Mormon. And he was raised Pentecostal, so it's completely different. So I met them in a park, and that missionary sat across from the table from me and told me that I would not see my kids in heaven because I was not married to a priesthood holder, and that after we died, that would just be it, and I wouldn't see them. And something just strongly told me that what she was telling me was wrong. And I didn't believe it. And after that, I just decided I was never going back to that church again. And then I ended up going last year. But I've made a video about that, and I can
Yeah.
link that in the. I can watch that if they want. But I think religion has a purpose here because there's so many religions. I think they all serve a purpose for certain people. It's just not for me. And religion to me is man-made, and all their rules and all their regulations, and you have to fit in this little box or you're out. And so that's why I go to non-denominational church, because it's just strictly learning about the Bible, God's word, and worshiping God and welcoming him back into my life. And so now I put God first for everything. When I'm getting ready to, I always start my day with him. I always end my day with him. But if there's something in my day that's showing up, I always pray and ask for guidance first. And I honestly do wish that was one thing I was doing my entire life, because it's made things so much easier. And I didn't do that until that experience last year. My faith in what I believed in was tested in that experience. And I feel like if I didn't believe in God, I wouldn't have been pulled out of that. That would have been a horrible place to sit without God being there.
Yeah.
You know. So
yeah.
But,
So where do you go from here? What do you want people to remember you for? And you want to teach, so where do you go?
So I honestly think that my purpose here is to teach about forgiveness and to help people move through that process. One thing that I want to be remembered for, I want to leave something behind. So I'm 50 now, and this really sticks in my mind. I want to leave something behind after I'm gone that will help somebody else, will continue to help people. And for me, that's the book that I'm working on now. And so the name of that book, people don't know, it's called How God Made Me Brave. And Yvonne is helping me be accountable because I tend to be a person who procrastinates, and she's helping me to be accountable for that. And my goal is to have that done by the end of this year. And I want it published, and I want to be able to leave it after I die so that it can help somebody else and continue to help somebody else. Because even if it doesn't help somebody while I'm alive, I honestly believe that somebody could be being born today that in 20 years they'll need that information. And I'm good with that. I don't think that God would have me write it for no reason. There's the purpose for it, and I don't know what it is, and I don't need to know. I just want it to help somebody else, and so that's what I want to be remembered for. Helping somebody else.
Helping somebody else. Well, I'm pretty sure you've already helped a lot of people along the way in some way or another, maybe not necessarily on the path of forgiveness, but to get them on their own path. Maybe you've helped nudge them a little bit one way or the other. You've certainly done that with me. So, I love you. So I'm sure you'll be remembered for helping people.
Yes, that's what I want.
Tell me what you want.
What I really want.
What you really, really want.
Okay.
Oh, we digress so quickly.
Thank you for doing this.
Well, Thank you for asking me to do this and for helping me along the process of doing it too.
Thank you for not reading the first bio.
So good. I'm going to post it. Can we put that in the notes down below too? No.
That's just
How about no? You know what would be kind of cool, if you don't mind, is maybe one of the things that you read.
Oh, posting it.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
linking those poems would be nice.
Yeah, I'll do that because I love those quotes, and those are gonna also be in my book. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I just want to thank Yvonne for doing
Thank you.
it for me.
You're welcome.
And just remember, if there's anything that you guys would like to share, I'm going to put my information down below, my email address and my Facebook page, so you can message me if you like. And so if there's any experiences or stories you'd like to share that will inspire other people, I invite you to come on here and share. And I think that's it. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next time. I love you guys. Bye.
Bye.